The Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu was instructed to make the menorah, and he found it very difficult, so he wasn't able to do it. So he threw the gold into the furnace, and it came out miraculously. So the Mefarshim are bothered with the question, what was so difficult? In the days of the Chashmonaim, the menorah was used for Avodah Zarah, so they made a new menorah. So what's so difficult for Moshe Rabbeinu to do? So Velvel Soloveitchik explains that the Pasuk says he was instructed to make a menorah with Gediim, Kaftorim, Afrochim, they're different pieces, and then there was a Hairah Shah that didn't apply in the days of the Chashmonaim. Kamareh Shehareisa Bahar has to look exactly the way the vision that you saw when you were on Har Sinai. So that he didn't remember exactly. You can make with Gediim, Kaftorim, Afrochim, but it won't necessarily be exactly the way the vision appeared on Har Sinai. So that was a Hairah Shah that only applied in the Mishkan. So that's what was difficult for Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Parsha, it says that you should have the Riyos, and you should have Lulois, you should have Isha Lachoisa, one next Mechubin Keneged the other one, and then cross them to hold together the Lulois. So the expression, it appears Isha Lachoisa. They're not sisters. Whenever it's something that's B'loshen Zachar, it says Isha Lachiv. Whenever it's B'loshen Nekeva, it says Isha Lachoisa. But it doesn't necessarily mean sisters. So the Ibn Ezra often quotes the Karoim, the interpretations that they gave, and he says that they're utterly ridiculous. So he quotes that the Karoim interpreted the Pasuk in the list of the forbidden relatives that you're not allowed to marry. So it says, Isha Lachoisa L'sikach Litzur Aleha B'chayeha. You're not allowed to marry Isha Achois Ishtoi. A man is not allowed to marry two sisters unless unless the first wife died. If the first wife died, he's allowed to marry her sister, because man, the first wife is still alive. Even if he divorced her, he's not allowed to marry her sister. So the Karoim interpreted Isha L'chos L'sikach, and not allowed to have two wives. Isha L'chos over here does mean a sister, and today's Sedra means the Lula should be opposite each other. So that was their interpretation. So he shows that it's incorrect. They thought that we assume it's a Chem de Rabbeinu Gershom, that you're not allowed to marry two wives. They interpreted that that's Pshat in the Pasuk, Isha L'choisa. If it's feminine, you say Isha L'choisa, even though they're not sisters. At the end of the Sedra, you have the Pasuk says the Chotzer of the Mishkan was 100 amos long and 50 amos wide. So it says, Arach HaChotzer Mea Bama V'Rochav should have said Chamishim Amma. It says V'Rochav Chamishim B'Chamishim, 50 by 50. It wasn't, the width was not 50 by 50, it was 50. So Rashi has one pshat, V'Rochav Chamishim B'Chamishim. The first half of the Chotzer, there was nothing there, it was empty. Starting from the first half is 50 by 50 amos, there was nothing there. Then, in the second half of the length of the Chotzer, starting from 50 amos, then you had the Mizbech HaChitzon and the Oil Moed and all the other things. And maybe that's Pshuto Shal Mikra. So the Gemara has a comment on the Pasuk, V'Rochav Chamishim B'Chamishim means 50 square. But it wasn't 50 square, it was 100 by 50. So the Torah Shabbal Peh says, take 100 by 50. So how much square amos, how many square amos were there in the Mishkan? If it's 100 by 50, so it's 5,000. No, 50 times 100 is 5,000. So if you make a square out of that, that'll be 70.6 amos each bar. The square root of 5,000 is 70.6. 70 and 3/5. That's called Shivim Amma V'Shirayim. 70 Ammas plus 70.6. And what does that have to do with anything? So the Gemara said that has to do with when you're making the cheshbon, there's a din in Tchum Shabbos that if you have a city, just because you have a lot of houses together, it's not called a city. In order to be called a city, there's a Mishnah in Erechin and there's a Mishnah in Erevin that says the same. In order to be considered a city, you have to have 3 chatzeres. And each chatzer has to, chatzeres mean 3 areas that have a wall around it. And And each chotzer has to have at least 2 batim in it, 2 different batim. How close to the chatzeres have to be? You can have one chotzer in New York, one chotzer in Los Angeles, and one chotzer in St. Louis. And the whole America, the whole North America is one ear. So it says that there must be some shear. Not mistaber that they have to be contiguous. The chatzeres have to be touching each other. They think not mistaber. So I think that's probably the shear. The shivim amma v'shirayim. And the Gemara says that din of shivim amma v'shirayim with respect to the houses in the city. Let's say you have a city, and then every city, the Gemara says, you calculate, you consider it as if it's in a rectangular shape. Even if it's not a rectangle, al pidin you consider a rectangle. So Manhattan is approximately a rectangle. It's not a rectangle according to the northeast, southwest, but it's approximately a rectangle. So the Gemara says, you just fill in the rectangle. So that's the city limits. And then you say 70 amas, 70.6 amas outside of the city limits is called ibur shalir, like a pregnant woman. So that's ibur shalir, that's extra. And outside of the ibur shalir, then you measure alpayim amma. Or let's say when you're trying to calculate, so Manhattan is approximately a rectangle, so you just fill in the rectangle the way it is. What if it's not approximately a rectangle at all? You have a city with houses all over the place, sloppy. So how do you draw the rectangle? The din is every city has to be a rectangular shape. So you draw it according to Rucha Shalaylam, according to a map, northeast, southwest. So you take the northernmost house and you draw a line there. Easternmost house, you draw a line there. And that's going to be the city limits. Then you measure 70.6 amas outside of that. And then you measure alpayim amma outside of that. So what do you mean to take the northernmost house? Let's say you have a lot of houses over here. Then you have a house 25 miles away. So that's the northernmost house of this city, 25 miles away. It's not part of the city. So how close does the house have to be to the other houses that it should be considered an extension of the city? So that's the shears. Shivim amma v'shirayim. It's in the Mishnah, it's like that. So the question is, Tosfos says it on the level of the rice. You can say, we paskin all of Tchumen is the Rabbanim. So you can say the whole thing is an asmachta. To me it sounds like an asmachta. 50 really means you take 100 by 50 and you multiply it. So the area of the Chotzer HaMishkan was 5,000 square amas, and then you take the square root of that. If it would have been in a square, it's not a square, it's a rectangle. If it would have been a square, it would have been 70.6 on every bar, each of the 4 bars. So I would have thought for sure that's an aspachtim of the Rabbanan. The Tosfos says no, it's a din deraisa v'negeh to the din of an ear. That's for the din of ayoras ambakavs chayma so shur benun. It only has a din of ear hamakefes chayma. That's a mishnah in Erichin like that. Only has a din deraisa of ear hamakefes chayma if it has the 3 chatzeres in it. That's a din deraisa. So Tosfos holds that this is a real drosha gemura. Real din deraisa, very unusual. This Shabbos is an unusual Shabbos. We're going to take out 3 Sefer Torah. The first Sefer Torah you're going to learn Parshas Terumah. The second Sefer Torah you're going to learn Parshas Rosh Chodesh that we read today. And we're not going to read the Talmud, just going to read Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. In the Gemara it says that when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos, learn the whole thing. What we read today, and we don't follow the Gemara. We follow the Masechah Sofrim. Masechah Sofrim says you only learn Yom HaShabbos Rosh Hashanah. The Masechah Sofrim is not from the Tanoim. It was written in the days of the Geonim by the Geonei Eretz Yisrael. That's what the Magen Avraham writes. They said all the other Masechtas Ktanas, like Masechas Tzitzis and Masechas Geirim and Masechas Kusim, they were all written in the days of the Geonim. So that's it disagrees with the Gemara. It's a Yerushalmi tradition. So for some reason or another, we follow the we often do not follow Masechas Sofrim. On this, we follow Masechas Sofrim. And when Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbos, we don't do like the Bavli that you learn everything that you read on Rosh Chodesh. You only learn Yom HaShabbos of Rosh Hashanah. And so tomorrow we're going to learn 3 Sefer Torah. First one is going to be Parshas Terumah. you give 6 aliyahs in Terumah, and then you finish the whole Seder. Then you give the 7th aliyah is going to be Kriyas Rosh Chodesh. Then you say Chatzi Kaddish after the 7 aliyahs, and then in the 3rd Sefer Torah Yalein about Shkolim. Yeah, so what is Shkolim all about? A lot of people don't know what Machzah Shekel is all about. So Machzah Shekel is the pay for the Korbanos Tzibur. By a Korban Yochid, the din is, the Gemara learns that from a Pasuk, the Gemara Nazir learns that from a Pasuk, that if a person is obligated to bring a Korban and can't afford it, so if he has good friends and neighbors, they can, without embarrassing him, they can go to the Gizban, the Beis HaMikdash, and say, our next door neighbor, a friend, has to bring a Korban, send him a letter that it was paid for. As long as he agrees, we'll be makar of the Korban. He has to agree. So as long as he agrees, we say, they can pay for the Korban. So that's learned out from a pasuk. You can be magdish, amanashi is kappa b'chavera. So during the Vayisheni period, there was had a lot of trouble from day number 1 till the end. There was a lot of trouble from the tzdukim. For a lot of apikusim, they didn't follow the Torah Shabbat Peh. There were many, many years that the Beis HaMikdash was run by the tzdukim, and they brought the Korbanos incorrectly. So this was one of the issues, that the tzdukim allowed, just like in a Korban Yochid, you can be magdish al manashis kappa b'chaveiron. So the same thing by Tmidim and Musafim. So they would have wealthy families donate $10 million to cover all the Korbanos this year. And then they hang up a sign. All the Korbanos were taken care of this year by the Goldstein family. So that's Keneged Adin. So the Gemara says when the Chachamim finally succeeded in kicking out the tzdukim, a lot of the Kohanim with tzdukim, they kicked out the tzdukim. A lot of times the tzdukim ran the Sanhedrin also. And when they kicked them out, so then they made one of the Yom Tovim, and Megillah Tainus is Yitoikem Tamida, the Korban Tamid was established properly. That you can't have individual families donate all the money. It's only called a Korban Tzibur if it's paid for by the Machzah Shekel money. If you take all the Jews who are alive today and they all chip in and they give, that's not called a Korban Tzibur, that's called a Korban HaShutfim. Tzibur means all of Klal Yisrael, starting from Maimed HaSinai till Yemos HaMashiach. Everybody's called a Tzibur, even the people who died already. Usually a Korban Schachter Shemesa Bailah, you can't be Makriv. But the Einat Tzibur Mesim, the Gemara says. So the Tzibur means all the Jews, Yotzim Mitzrayim, until Yemos HaMashiach. That's a special din of Machzas HaShekel. When they had a suggestion in the days of the Bali HaTos, there was an Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. So they had a discussion, maybe they should make a Mizbech and bring Korbanos. So somehow some say the whole discussion only was about Korban Pesach. Why not about Korban Tmidim and Musafim? Also, it's Manakavur. You can bring it Betumah. So they say because Tmidim and Musafim, you have to buy it from Machzah Shekel money. So how many Jews are going to give Machzah Shekel in days of Bali HaTos? It's not going to be 51% of the Jewish population. Let's say today, 51% of the world Jewish population is not Orthodox. So probably the majority will not want to chip in to give money to bring Korbanos. They don't hold from Korbanos. They think that it's a pagan thing. So that was a big issue that the Talmud of Rabbi Kiveger, Tzvi Hirsch Kalischer, was known as a big Zionist, but his Chidushim are printed on the bottom of the page in Yoreh De'ah. He has good things to say. I remember once in Shir, Rav Soloveitchik got stuck when he was giving Shir on Yoreh De'ah, and he did no pshat, and he said, ooh, on the bottom of the page, it has a Tfilah Tzadik. That's a good pshat. Who is he? Didn't know who it was. So he looked on the first page in the Yoreh De'ah, and it says who wrote everything. So Tzvi Hirsch Kalischer knew how to learn. He didn't know that. He knew he was a Zionist. Everybody was one of the religious Zionists. They didn't know he's a Talmud Chacham. He always has good things on Yoreh De'ah. So Tzvi Hirsch Kalischer came up with the idea in the early 1800s. We should just go build a Beis HaMikdash, bring the Korbanos, and everything is fine. He wrote a whole essay, Drishas Tzion. He thought that he solved all the halachic problems. So they point out one of the problems that he never dealt with was that was already after the beginning of the Reform movement. So they doubted that very much, that you get 51% of the world Jewish population to chip in for Korbanos Tzibur. So is that called Korbanos Tzibur? Highly questionable. Yeah. So the Ravid in his comments on the Rambam has an interesting comment. It says in Ezra that when Ezra and Nehemiah came, brought the Jewish people back to Eretz Yisrael, and they completed the building of the second Beis Hamikdash, and then they gave Machzas HaShekel. So everybody gave Darkona Shel Zohav. They gave gigantic golden coins instead of Machzas Shekel, which hardly anything, $5 probably Machzas Shekel. They gave gigantic golden coin. Why? So the Rambam has a suggestion that's quoted in the Shulchan Aruch. We have a minhag that on Tainas Sibur we give Zecher Machzas Shekel. You shouldn't say it's Machzas Shekel because it may become Hegdish. That's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. You should say Zecher Machzas Shekel. It's really Machzas Shekel. You can't use it for tzedakah. You can't use it for other purposes. So so that's so it says in Shulchan Aruch that the minhag is you give $0.50. $0.50 doesn't correspond to Machzas Shekel. So that's based on the Rambam, that the Rambam says you have to give machzis. In America, the dollar is the basic thing. In Russia, it's the ruble. In Britain, it's the shilling. Whatever. In Eretz Yisrael, it's the shekel. Whatever is the matbeh hayotze v'esem medina, that all the other cash, the penny, nickels, dimes, quarters, everything is based on the dollar. Dollar is the Bitcoin. So the Rambam says that you have to give machzis of that coin, and it can never be less than Machzas Shekel. It always has to be at least Machzas Shekel. And every year, Bezdin Hagadol has to decide how much everybody has to give. So they have to determine what's considered the Matbeh HaYotze B'Oseh Medina. There's a Tosfos in Kiddushin who says like that with respect to Pidyon Haben. The Chochmas Sodom says that you have to give 5 rubles. He lived in Russia. You have to give 5 rubles, even though it's way more than Pidyon Haben needs. You have to give 5 of the Matbeh HaYotze B'Oseh Medina. So the Rambam says that that's why they had to give Darkona Shel Zohav, because that was the Matbeh HaYotze B'Oseh Medina at that time. The Ravid makes fun of the Rambam and says, what are you talking about? The people were so poor. It says in Tanakh they were so poor. How can it be that the Matbeh was Darkona Shel Zohav, big golden coins? They were living on pennies. How can it be that the main Matbeh, he doesn't think that that's correct? So the Ravid says like this, the Bezdin Hagadol has to figure out every year how many karbanos tzibur they're going to bring. Is it going to be Hoshana Muberet 13 months or 12 months? If it's 13 months, you have to bring more karbanos. Then you have to figure out how much will the animals cost today. We know how much the animals cost today. You have to ask experts in economics in this field that they think the cost of animals will go up in the course of the year. So how much money will they need to buy all the karbanos for 13 or 12 months? Then they have to figure what's the world Jewish population, how many people are going to chip in. Not everybody gives. Even though it's a mitzvah, not everybody's going to do the mitzvah. We hope we'll have 51%, less than 50%. That's the time that they said to Tzvi Hirsch Kalisha, how can that be called a korban tzibur? If Roy Tzibur are not participating. Then you have to figure how many people are going to pay on time. They have to have the money starting from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the beginning of the fiscal year in the Beis Hamikdash for the Karbanos. So you announce on Rosh Chodesh Adar that another month it's going to be Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and the new Karbanos have to, starting from Rosh Chodesh Nisan on, have to be purchased with the new Machzas Shekel money. But if you paid for it from last year's or the leftover Machzas Shekel is also good. But l'chatchila, mitzvasai l'chatchila, b'shleimusa is to pay for the karbanos starting from Rosh Chodesh Nisan on with the new Machzas Shekel money. So whenever they make, let's say YU makes an appeal, they raise money. The people pledge money, but it takes them a long time till they pay the money. So Machzas Shekel, fine. Everyone is mukhayif. Are they going to give it before Rosh Chodesh Nisan? You have to take the Machzas Shekel money and buy 3 times a year. They would take the money. So 2 weeks before Pesach, that's Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and then 2 weeks before Shavuos and 2 weeks before Sukkot, they would take big sacks, 3 big sacks full of money. So there's a question: how many people will bring the money on time? Doesn't help. They're going to bring the money 20 years later. And Beis HaMikdash, they had big pushkas, big boxes where they put the money. So the money that they're giving for this year's Machzah Shekel is called Taklan Chadatin, Shkolim Chadashim. There's a guy 90 years old who became a Baal Tshuva, and he found out that he was supposed to have been giving Machzah Shekel for the last 75 years, and he never gave. So he has to check in the records, how much was Machzah Shekel the year that I was Bar Mitzvah, how much was it the next year. Every year it's a different amount. Depends whether the year has 12 months or 13 months, how much the animals are going to cost. Price can go up. Once in a long while the price goes down. And they have to figure out how much every year. So every year they would announce how much the Machzah Shekel is this year. It can never be less than Machzah Shekel. But it's usually more, usually way more. Sometimes they'll say Machzah Shekel this year is $20.14. So the pasuk says, Hershel yarba v'hadalo yamid. You're not allowed to give donations in the Machzah Shekel. The korbanos have to be purchased with Machzah Shekel money only. Let's say a non-Jew will say, I want to donate, and Mishnah, you don't accept donation. Or let's say a Jew already gave Machzah Shekel. So he can't donate another $100. That's the Hershel yarba. No one can give a penny more than what they said, $26.18. No one's allowed to give more than that amount. No one's allowed to give less than that. And even if there are billions of Jews in the whole wide world, and they're all giving Machzah Shekel, way more than you need, you never give less than Machzah Shekel. That's a question, from what age on do you give Machzah Shekel? So the pasuk says, you only draft people in the army from the age of 20 on. In Hershel now they draft in the army before 20, so that's really shaloi kedin. You have to find out, maybe they don't send them in combat until they're 20. I think they do send them into combat before 20 also. If you have no choice, you have no choice. During the Milchemet HaShichur, I had a brother-in-law who passed away already before last Pesach. So he wasn't even Bar Mitzvah. He was in the you could call it an army. He was in the army during Milchemet HaShichur. They needed every person who was healthy was helping in the war. But strictly speaking, if you have Shanim Ketikunim, you don't draft people younger than 20. So if you're taking a census of the people to see how many people you have how many men you have over the age of 20 to serve in the army, then it's only 20 years, 20 and above. But what about if the Machzah Shekel is for the purpose of purchasing korbanos siba? Maybe the shir is bar mitzvah. There are two girsas in Yerushalmi about that. The Pashta says that it doesn't depend on 20. What do you have a din that depends on? Pashta, it depends on bar mitzvah. So there was a collection of Tshuvas HaRosh that was called the Samim Rosh. The one who claims that he found the manuscript, his father was a prominent rabbi. So all the Rabbanim gave a haskama. And Rabbi Yehuda gave a haskama. All the Rabbanim, they all knew the father. They didn't know that the son was a crackpot. So he made a forgery. The Chasam Sofer refers to it as Kizvei HaRosh. The Sheker, Chav Zayin Beis, Kizvei HaRosh. There are some tshuvas that are clearly not by the Rosh. He says that we're not noek tumah v'tar b'zman hazeh, so the married women don't have to go to mikveh. That's 100% wrong. That's 100% wrong. So they know there is a meshugana. They knew his father, so they all gave a haskam. So this crackpot, not only did he forge the tshuvas, he put his own footnotes on the bottom of the page. That's called Kasa Deharsana. So in the Kasa Deharsana, he has this famous comment that many quote. Since the Tzlach, written by the Rabbi Yehuda, so that Tzlach writes, and the Mishnah Berurah paskins like this, that women are not mechuyev to daven musaf. Women are mechuyev to daven Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv, al pi Pashtas. Mishnah Berurah is Mekel and Ma'ariv. But Pashtas says women are mechuyev to daven Shmon Esrei for Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv. So the Mishnah Berurah paskins like the Tzlach, that's in the Yehuda Sefer and Bracha. Women are not mechuyev to daven musaf, because musaf, the Gemara says, Tefillah Rachminin, it's Bakoshas Sarachim, so the women need Bakoshas also. But that's only by Shachris Mincha Ma'ariv. But Musaf is only in the Shalma Farm Swasenu. That's in the place of Hakrobas Karbonis. We don't have Karbonis, so we have to say the Shemon Esrei. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will accept it as if we brought the Karbonis. So since women are not mechuyev to give Machzah Shekel, so therefore it follows logically that women are not mechuyev to daven Musaf. How does it follow logically? Highly questionable. the women are not mechuyev to pay for the korbanos, but once the men pay, they makriv it, they makriv it on behalf of everybody, even on behalf of the women who didn't give the machzah shekel. But the Mishnah Berurah passes not like that, that a respect for the tzlach. He passes like that, the women are not mechuyev. So this character, the Kasser the Harson, in his footnotes on the bottom of the Sameh Rosh, he writes that we all know that people before the age of 20 were not mechuyev to give machzah shekel. Very questionable. The Parshas says that it's not correct. That's when you're counting how many people there are in the army. How much is the population to know how many soldiers you have? So you only count from 20 years up. But as far as machzah shekel, probably from 13 on. So he's assuming that it's 20. So just like the tzlach says, women are not mechuyev to daven musaf. So anybody before the age of 20 is not mechuyev to daven musaf. So maybe he can't be the shliach tzibur for older people. If there are people in the shul, I'm a lot older than 20. Some of you are older than 20. So whoever is older than 20 cannot be yotze with the shliach tzibur who is younger than 20, because they ain't mechuyev b'dover. And emotzi aser abdeicha was. So I think the Torah T'mima quotes this from the Kasser the Harson. He didn't realize that the old Sefer is a fake. Then there's a Mishnah in Shkolim that says if a cotton started giving machzah shekel, even though he's not mechuyev to, cotton either means before the age of 20, before the age of 13, whichever it means. So a cotton gives, so he's mechuyev to continue to give, because a minik tov is binding mitam neder. It's based on that Mishnah. Minik tov is binding mitam neder. So that is a famous ktsois and nesivas. They ask Akasha, a cotton al pidin is a la bardas. So how can he be magdish money? He can't give donations to machzah shekel. You can say hefker besna hefker, even though the cotton is not a bardas, he can midirabanan, he could be makne. Sometimes you have midirabanan, a mufla samach liyish, a year before bar mitzvah, so he can take nedarim. So that's a machloikas, and the Gemara machloikas, the Rambam and the Raiva, whether that's the Raisa, the Rabbanan. So if you hold that didn't mufla samach liyish, a year before bar mitzvah is only with the Rabbanan. But machzah shekel can't accept donations. It has to be your magdish it for this purpose. So the Ktsois HaChoshen says that you see from this that hefker bezna hefker works min haTorah, not only to be mafka someone's property, even to give them money to someone else. Not only I can be mafka my jacket by making a declaration. So too, so hegdish. So the bezna has the right hefker bezna hefker. Bezna has the ability to be mafka my jacket against my wishes. We treat bezna as if they're the bailam. So just like the bailam could be mafka their jacket without a maisa, so the bezna can do it also. But I can't be makta my jacket to you without a maisa. So how can hefka bezna hefka help to be makta to someone else min haTorah? So that's a big machloikas, the ktsois and the nesivas, and machloikas in the earlier generation. Earlier generation they had that machloikas, but the hefka bezna hefka lahaknas lacherim works min haTorah midirabanan. So the ktsois claims that in this Mishnah in Shkolim that it says that a kid before a cotton could be a person before the age of 20. If you hold like that Girsa in the Yerushalmi, that before the age of 20 they're not chayiv to give machzah shekel, but they're old enough to be magdish it. Let's say women are not mechuyev to give machzah shekel, but they have the same kedusha as the men. So if a woman wants to volunteer to give machzah shekel, she can give it l'shem machzah shekel. It's not a problem. But if a guy wants to volunteer, then not. So let's say a cotton is going to volunteer. So if it's only based on hefker bezna hefker, so the ktsois says hefker bezna hefker works on the level of the raisi even to be makna lachem. So that's why it works. And the nesibas thinks that it's not correct. It only works with the rabbanon. So how can they accept the cotton's machzah shekel? So the nesibas says because the cotton puts it in the big pushka, in the Beis Hamikdash, in the tak nacharatin pushka. So hegdish is kind of with the kinyan chatzah. So the whole thing is a pella. The ktsois doesn't make sense, and the nesivas doesn't make sense. You don't accept donations in machzah shekel. So if the kid's going to put it in a box, hegdish is going to be kind of with the kinyan chatzah. That's not machzah shekel. Or hegdish is going to be kind of with hefker bezna hefker. It's also not machzah shekel. You have to be magdish it l'shem machzah shekel. Very difficult, that shita, very difficult. There is the Mishnayos talk about haparei chov shel chaver in the end of Ksubas. Let's say I owe a lot of money to people and I don't have so much money to pay. So a good Samaritan comes over and he pays the money. And he pays the money for me. So the Mala has no right to chepe me, to bother me. So the Mishnah Melech raises a question, that the Mala can't ask the loiva to pay. Is that because the chov is parua? Or maybe you should say, no, the chov is not parua. It wasn't the loiva who paid. A good Samaritan paid, someone else paid. But it's as if it's self-understood, it's implicit. Someone else is giving him, I owe $5,000. Someone else gives the $5,000. It's understood that the malva is meichel the chayiv because I gave him. Someone else gave him $5,000 on my behalf. Is the pshat. Someone else pays my chayiv. The malva was meichel the chayiv. Or they say, no, the chayiv is parua. And he has an afkamina. So Rabbi Chanan learned by Rab Shimon Shkop and by Rab Chaim. So sometimes he has from Rab Shimon Shkop, sometimes Rab Chaim. So he heard from Rab Shimon that there's a rayif in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah in the middle of Nedarim, that if I took a neder not to get hana from someone else, he can be shokal or shiklo. He can do me a toiva and pay the machzah shekel on my behalf. So if the pshat and someone else paying my chayvis is that the malva is meichel, so how is the Gizbar Balabas to be Meichel on Machzah Shekel? You're not Yoitze if he's Meichel. You have to have, he gave it Bel Shem Machzah Shekel. So he said, isn't it a right from the Mishnah that when someone else pays my chayiv, the chayiv is parua? That's what Rab Shimon Shkop thought, that's a raya brura. I thought it was not a good raya. Because there's a pasuk in Chumash that you learn out, that we said before, that there's an institution of Magdish al Menashe's Kappa B'Chavera. When you give the Machzah Shekel money, it's not a din of Piron Achov. It's not a Piron Achov. It's a Hagdasha. You're Magdish, the coin that you give as Machzah Shekel. You Magdish it, the Shem Machzah Shekel. So that's covered with the din of Magdish al Menashe's Kappa B'Chavera. It doesn't prove to any other chayiv. It's only by Hegdish, just like someone can be Magdish a korban on my behalf, and they can bring it to the Gizbar, and the Gizbar will send a letter that it was send it the letter to the other person that's taken care of. Yeah. The Gemara learns out from the Pesuk that Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the beginning of the fiscal year in the Beis HaMikdash, starting from Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the new korban sigba have to be paid for with the new Machzah Shekel money. So the odds are 6-1 that Rosh Chodesh Nisan is not going to fall out on a Shabbos. There's 7 days in the week. Probably going to fall out the middle of the week sometime. So every week on Shabbos, you put lechem upon him on the shulchan. It sits there for a week, then you take it off next Shabbos, and the Kohanim eat it before Chatzos. It's kosher kachman. They eat it until at Chatzos. So when they paid for the lechem upon him, Erev Shabbos, a week ago, in the middle of the week, it was going to be Rosh Chodesh. They paid for it from the old Machzah Shekel money or the new Machzah Shekel money. That's a korban that's going to be korev after Rosh Chodesh Nisan, but he put it on the shulchan before. So the Migdash David learned in Slabodka in the Koilel, and he writes that they learned kachim and they were breaking their heads. They couldn't figure out what's going on there. And then they learned it, they didn't know the Yisodis. Then they learned it a second time, and then they finally began to understand what's going on. So the klal was in the kollel, if you come up with any chidushim, you have to write them. So everyone will be able to be done. So this Reb David Rappaport, he wrote like encyclopedic essays based on all the Rishonim that he had access to. The Rashi and the Tosfos and the Rabbeinu Gershom and the Shittim Kubetzes, whatever he had. And the Rambam and the Ravid, all the Rishonim. So he wrote fantastic essays. So he thinks that the lechem aponim that they put on the shulchan the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the lechem aponim had to be purchased with the new Machzah Shekel money. But if you look in the Mishnah, it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like 2 weeks before Pesach. It means on Rosh Chodesh Nisan they start using the new money. according to them, they had to buy the carbon. Had to buy the carbon of the lechem apanim. They had to buy the flour for the lechem apanim before Rosh Chodesh, because they put it on the mizbeach on Shabbos and it sat there till next week. So that's a question. Which money did they use? But the Eved, if they use the old money, it's also good. The old money, it's also good. But l'chatchila, the mitzvah of Yishleimus is that starting from Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the new Karbanos Siba should be paid for with the new money. Okay, a good Shabbos, everybody. Bruchim to you.
I think a little bit in respect, I think what kind of makes sense for the executive for the Katan. I think a little bit